Hello and welcome to The Bouncer. This is a really interesting speedrun,
The Bouncer.
as it is a Squaresoft game that's kind of an arcadey kind of beat 'em up story. What we were going to be doing is the any percent category of Sion. Sion is kind of a mix of like the true like late 90s, early 2000s when this came out, and versus the kind of offspring that became like Sora. So there's always a culture kind of going around that Sion looks like a very older Sora from the Kingdom Hearts series. Now this game has a lot of RNG to it, only because like it has that kind of arcadey feel. For this intro level, we don't necessarily want to attack all these enemies. We want them to attack us. We don't get any extra bonuses. We don't get any extra points, really, that have any type of pertaining factors to the run in any way, shape, or form. So we kind of maybe antagonize them a little bit to kind of help get them to attack us, but mostly for the AI, they occasionally want to try and like go away and then dodge. So you'll see me kind of run around, try to figure out how to antagonize them. You can taunt, but taunting can pose some issues, only because you can basically have a like unique, or I guess have all three come against one powerhouse. So you see there, you get your abilities, your life up, your defense up, and your power up. All that mostly kind of plays through for the run. We mostly focus on power, but anytime you get like an ability upgrade where it goes from like a D to an E to a C to a B to an A, that makes the game a little bit more difficult. So we want to minimize as much as we can while also optimizing how much extra power we can have. In this game, surprisingly, even though it's called the Bouncer, you're not really a bouncer source as much as you are protecting your friend Dominique. But what we do a lot of is, in fact, punching. Now, each button on the PlayStation 2 controller does have the ability to use like punch, kick, side sweep, anything else along those lines. And depending on how heavy you push your input, will be depending on the type of extra moves that you use. Using L1 is a way to determine that we can make sure we get those powerful punches. Anytime you do attack an enemy, you do get an extra bonus point. Anytime you finish an enemy, you do get those bonus points. And if you attack them, if you get combine them, you get more bonus points. That does kind of play a factor, but not a whole lot in this particular run. There's a lot of cutscenes here that we do kind of skip through, and it's definitely an era of the early 2000s from some of its acting. You see right there, we just got our bonus because while we finished another enemy, it hit another enemy and died. I don't necessarily like to I like to save my points for the bosses to make sure I minimize as much as I possibly can. However, there are some enemies where that's going to cause a little of a problem. And then the placement of the other AI makes things really, really difficult sometimes. It kind of leaves you on your feet for the speedrun. Because even then, you saw like a lot of times when those security guards kind of gang up, or they're all in one particular section here. All kind of you know, if they're gang up, then they have the ability to really kind of overpower me. And then you're going to see a lot of times with certain enemies that they can just do massive damage, which we don't want. There's also the in-game timer, which sometimes can be used, but if you die and then you have to start the run all over, you basically have to completely reset the console. Mostly because that if you want to use the in-game timer, it constantly goes throughout. Our main point is we're trying to find our friend Dominique, who's been taken by a lot of the bad individuals in this particular area, in this particular game. Here we're going on the bridge. What's over on top of the train, really. So that we can go off and get closer to our first boss, which is going to be Echidna. And Echidna loves to be very, very acrobatic.
Ready?
And so we're just kind of going off here and just fighting off a lot of those enemies, skipping a lot of cutscenes. Here's where we mostly... I got a power-up earlier. I'm getting a double extra power-up to make sure I can go through this next fight relatively fine. Because this first one is Echidna. Echidna is a very, very strong... Like all the bosses have a really, really high-level difficulty, and they get stronger. We do fight multiple bosses throughout this entire area. But you'll notice here, especially, Echidna has moves that can just do a lot of damage. Even when I get on the ground and I can't get up, I'm still being hit because of the type of power that Echidna has. The other problem is, a lot of times, you really can't necessarily control who your AI is attacking. So sometimes you'll be in the middle of attacking the boss, and your character will shift towards an enemy. Which means now you have to find a way to either not get hit by that enemy, or attack the enemy, eat the time loss. And so what we're really doing throughout all this whole area here, was, saving our friend Dominique. Dominique was part of what's known as the Mikado Group. It's a solar technology. So we're just trying to go off and save this person from being in the wrong group. They probably got into the wrong hands, did all of that. What's happening here, I can't fully figure out, because you go off and look for clues to kind of like help the train, or help stop the train. But when you grab something, the game just kind of stops, and you can't really do anything. Button mashing all the way through gets me nothing throughout all of that. Trying to find ways to do like an emergency stop. This is kind of one of the longer sections. You do have a lot of these kind of like moving movie parts, so to say. And this is kind of one of them where you're just running away from the security guards. And the hitbox, I assume it's a hitbox, does kind of dictate certain issues. Because you can see, like, I'm farther away, but I'm still kind of in that, like, ready stance. Because both of our hitboxes are colliding. For here, the trick is you want to be as close as you can to those rails. That way you can get to that cutscene area a little bit faster. And because the guards were completely on the other side running past me, I didn't have to worry about that stance that I have, which is important. If you notice, every time I open up each individual area, my character kind of spins and gets a little disoriented. And a lot of it is just because the character starts, and just the animation of how the character starts. So I may hold up on the joystick to tell the game, hey, I want to go up. But because of this, like how the camera presents itself right at the beginning, it may say, no, you're actually supposed to be left. And you can't really detect that until it actually happens in real time. So you see I'm just constantly building up points through all of that. You can save through each individual one. For a marathon, we would have extra saves in case something happens, because like we get into a fight maybe with one of the enemies known as Duragon. we want to make sure that we have a backup save in case the worst case scenario. Because Duragon is a very, very, very tricky enemy. You'll see me do a lot of that type of move where I do like this one punch, like this 2-punch combo, and I punch once and I do a lot heavier opposed, and that gives you a lot of extra damage to all the enemies. But sometimes the controller may not fully recognize that it's a heavy attack, and then you get your 3-tone combo.
The ship's ours.
Also, you have to be careful with the start, because sometimes it won't register like your buttons. So you gotta be just a little bit cautious with that. This game was, I believe, Square's first PlayStation 2 game. I'm not quite sure about that though, but it's definitely an arcade beat 'em up game that a lot of people seem to forget, or maybe intentionally forget. You can play as all 3 characters. There are multiple endings for each individual one. There are multiple categories for each individual one. But if you notice, each individual time you have the ability of, oh no, I want to play as Ko this time, or I want to play as Volt. So you have that option as well. You'll see here where my option usually at the top is to attack one of those watchdogs immediately, so I can get them out of the way, because watchdogs can be incredibly, incredibly annoying in this particular section, as you can see. But a lot of times the AI will come up behind you and start attacking you, which then makes your character pivot to them, and then you have the dogs just kind of constantly attacking you. Once again, I'm going to get the power up because I have another boss coming up here. Mugetsu, I believe is who it is. I have I'll fight Mugetsu 3 times in this particular speedrun. This is the first time, and then you'll notice immediately what I'm trying to do is getting Mugetsu out of the little circle there. Because that way I can make sure that I don't have to worry about any of the other enemies that are around me. But a lot of times that's a little bit difficult, only because, like right there. Just how the enemies kind of how the AI is done on that. I'm taking another power up because we get an immediate next boss here. This is going to be Duragon. Duragon is the final boss. This is the first time we meet Duragon. Duragon, I believe, is the leader of like the Mikado group, who takes Dominique. So the catch is here is that Duragon is so strong. Duragon's only going to fight us with one arm. Normally what you want to do here is try to get Duragon from behind so that you can lay those powerful moves. Because you can see here that if you do right there, like I'm blocking, and then I immediately switched on characters, and I didn't even have a choice. The character just did that. You'll see how strong Duragon is near the end of this run.
Next time, try.
And so now we have a lot of cutscenes that we skip here, which is a lot of backstory as to the importance of Duragon and Dominique. But again, we skip through all of that. And essentially what happens afterwards is that we kind of get kidnapped, get thrown into a cell of what I believe is the Mikado group factory of sorts. And so we just have to go off and fight our way. Now, if you notice, Volt and Ko are not here. If you play as Volt or Ko, you get different side missions based off of that. Again, the main objective that Squaresoft wanted to do, again, at this time it was Squaresoft, was mostly to kind of give you this kind of like movie-oriented, choose-your-own-adventure type situation. So you have multiple endings throughout all of this. You have multiple scenarios throughout all of this to make sure you can unlock different endings and go through all of that. Now, we want to go down this road because it's a little bit faster. If we go straight on like the game told us to, if the character was our direction, we would fight a bunch of more enemies. And while it does give us better strats, it is actually a lot longer, which we don't necessarily want to do. That's kind of the other reason why I'm like hooking against the wall there, to make sure I don't accidentally hit like the wrong door. which would also, yet again, trigger that amount of enemies, which, again, we don't want. One of the other enemies that you have here is the camera angle, because you notice right there, the camera completely shifted and disoriented where I was. This can be kind of tricky if you haven't figured out really how to do things, or if the AI doesn't necessarily work for you. Because, like you can see here, those enemies all kind of separated. There have been plenty of times where they'll just be right next to you, and they'll just all take a punch at the same time and make you lose so much HP. So P101 are the robots there. Usually, if you can usually just kick them. And if you hit them at the right time, it just kind of destroys their attacking animation and completely resets it. The other thing you want to do, if you can, is kind of get them against the wall so they're not constantly moving back. As you can see a little bit of the loss that I'm doing by moving all the way back and trying to, rather than when I get here, and you can see where I'm getting really close to there and they don't move, and I can just kind of get them in a corner and then just leave them there. Right here. And it's just kick after kick after kick after kick. I get my power up here because while I do have a little bit of extra minor enemies, we're gonna mostly prepare for the next enemy, the next boss, which is a panther. Luckily, it's a panther, but the panther can occasionally combo you. In this playthrough, that did not happen, but it can happen to where you get comboed, and then you're just kind of stuck in that situation. And yes, I did pre-record this. And right here is the fight against the panther. You can see, luckily, it wanted to attack me on the other side, and since I wasn't up there, but you can see, like, as it approaches me, I'm able to counter it just by kicking, which means that fight just goes by really fast. I don't get hit at all. It's a flawless victory. And then I get the extra life up here as a backup for a marathon strat when I fight the second form of Mugetsu. Because each time you fight Mugetsu, or at least any one of these enemies, they get harder and a little bit more stronger, and they have more abilities. The only one that I do not believe does that is actually going to be Echidna, the second time you fight Echidna. But you can see I immediately spawned in the wrong direction of where Mugetsu was. And that is a little bit of a problem. And see, like, I'm in kind of dead center. They're all over here. I can't really get to Mugetsu. And right there, because of that. So again, the objective is to kind of get Mugetsu away so I don't have other enemies constantly attacking me or my character being forced to attack them. You can't really rely on your partners as well just because they just tend to stand there occasionally. And so now we have Dominique back. We finally got Dominique. But now we have to leave. Which is a little bit tricky because we've been alerted. You know, they know that we're here. So now we have to escape. And we have this escape. If you're working with Sion, you have this escape area here. And there's all sorts of enemies here. And there's also a lot of weird tricks that come with the camera angles. You can see where I'm kind of getting away from the robots only because I don't want to stand there and have that, like, fighting stance ready. Because if I get that fighting stance, that's just slowing me down over time. This is also one of those early 2000s games where you only have like a limited soundtrack, so you hear a lot of the same stuff over and over. The other thing you want to keep here is now that Dominique's on your side, you do not want Dominique to run out of health. Because if Dominique runs out of health, this is a game over. And it's more so for the purposes of the speedrun, as long as you kind of have an idea of where you're going, then you're fine. Also, if you noticed occasionally, like when I loaded into this section, I kind of froze there for a second. That's just the game being a little wonky, and not knowing my input commands for half a second. And see it right there, just a little bit disoriented from the camera. You're going to see it in the next section too, where I'm just a little bit disoriented from the camera because the camera is shifting in a way that it normally doesn't. I'm sorry, not this section, but the next one. But see, like, you know, you got to be a little bit worried about Dominique's health, and you can't really control Dominique in any way, shape, or form. You just kind of have to hope for the best that they follow you. Yeah, see, the camera's in front of me, and I can't really change that. So I'm just trying to figure out where it's at, and yeah. And that's the end of that section. Not necessarily terrible, but as long as you have an idea, it's a little bit easier. You get to go forth and skip a lot of cutscenes here. We get another boss fight. This is like the one time we only fight this boss, PD4. Kind of a hybrid of sorts. PD4 has a very, very powerful whip that does a lot of damage. Right there, you saw all that damage. The main problem with the bosses here is they can combo you, and then if you get into that combo, you cannot escape. And we're gonna grab this power up now because we have a fight with 3 robots and then another fight with Echidna. So we're gonna grab the power up now just to make things a little bit easier for this boss fight, or Dominique, for this next fight. So we're going to do this particular fight. You'll see it here where the enemy will try to attack and I'll hit it and it'll cancel that animation and then make them go back to their opening stance animation. It plays a big factor here as long as you can time it right. And then, like, and then it makes things go a little bit faster because of that, and it's a lot safer. But in the next boss fight, you fight 2 of those LD-15s, and then you fight Echidna for a second time. And again, the main objective, especially with Echidna, is to get Echidna out of that. Because if you try to attack Echidna in the middle, you're going to get ambushed by the other 2 robots, who can make you lose a ton of health because you can be comboed by Echidna, attacked by a robot, and then comboed again by Echidna. And sometimes Echidna can play, sometimes they can play very friendly, and sometimes they can just decide, no, we're not gonna play friendly. You see right there, because Echidna's next to the robot, it just threw me to the ground. But I'm just only trying to attack Echidna. Because as long as the boss dies, you don't have to worry about the other enemies. And the battle just ends, just like that. I grab the extra health here as well, because the next fight is the next time we fight against Mugetsu. And Mugetsu is very strong here. So what you're going to see me here do, actually, is in the game we're grabbing a ship because they got Dominique into the skies, and now we have to get a ship to get back to find Dominique. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to pick... we're not going to pick Sion there because Volt's going to control the ship. We fight Sion. We grab Sion to fight Mugetsu. Now, Mugetsu is very strong here because Mugetsu has the ability to spin from one side of the map to the other, or almost throughout the entire map, which can do a lot of damage. Luckily, when we go through this, Mugetsu plays really nice and doesn't really do much of anything. We skip a lot of cutscenes to figure it out. We have technically 3 more fights left, 2 more bosses. And so we attack the Panther again, but the Panther now has the ability to morph into her. We kind of do want the Panther because the Panther's a little bit easier to attack just by the kicking. So it makes things a little bit easier for us. So if we can get that, then that's what we want. Because of this next fight, I want as much health as I possibly can. Now we're going to fight Duragon twice. So the thing with Duragon is very tricky because you want Duragon to attack the enemy so you can attack from behind. However, Duragon is very strong and can do a lot of damage. So you can see right there, they countered my block, and we're able to do that much damage right there. Has a roundhouse kick, has a lot of kicking abilities, and is very, very, very strong. You can see how much health they're doing to me right now. Which means I gotta play it safe, because I don't get any extra health for the second time I fight Duragon. So the more you mess up here, the more stressful it can be when you fight Duragon the second time. Because again, you'll see where I just don't get any extra health. And in fact, I decide I'm going to go ahead and grab that extra life, which I may not have been the best idea, but I do it in the hopes that maybe I can get a little bit of extra health, but as you can see, I don't. I'm down to basically 1 HP. Like, if Duragon so much as looks at me the wrong way, that's it. That's game over. So the main objective is to constantly run around Duragon, so I attack from behind. And luckily it pays off, and we get a 2801, or 2802. But that's it. That is the Bouncer Any % Sion. Thank you all so much for watching, and look forward to Summer Games Done Quick. Thank you so much.